Hi, everyone. Welcome to Unleash Her. Hey, guys, I'm Roberta, in case you don't know me, and I'm so glad that you're here. I have a very special friend with me today, and my friend is she is so sweet and so kind. And we've done one interview before, and I'm so excited about this one. And Carol, thank you so much for being on here today.
Hey, Roberta, I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm excited.
Oh, I'm very excited. Miss Carol Bannons, thank you. It is such a pleasure. And the reason I want to tell everybody is that I was kind of looking at your Facebook and I noticed that you have another book that you just published. And so I thought it was really important that, we got on here today so that you could tell everyone about that. And this is really something that I believe everybody needs. And so, the first thing that I want to do to ask everyone is to go ahead and like this video and share it with your friends, anyone who you feel could hear this message today. Um, Carol you're such a beautiful soul, and you're a grief coach.
Yeah.
And we met in the coaching industry in Kathleen Cameron's community. And so, I would love it if you would tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you're working on.
I will. Thanks, Roberta. I'm English living in Canada, and my second husband, Brian, died in 2018. And of course, you go into grief, and I didn't know what grief was like. I had no idea. I knew I'd be sad, but I had no idea. And so I ended up burning out at work. I went back to work very quickly. And then I decided, no, I'm leaving. And I ended up going into Kathleen's coaching program, which really helped me to sort of figure out what I wanted to do. And so I decided to become a coach and I became a grief coach. What I never thought I would become is an author. I had no aspirations to write. I had never done creative writing. And so, as you know, you had me on when we talked about my first book, Kintsugi Your Heart, The Art of Living with Grief, which was all about grief poetry. But really what that was really me finally expressing my pain, my emotions that I had put down so that I could go back to work. So they came pouring out of me, and that's a very different book to the new book. And we were just talking beforehand about what I wanted to do is to make a book that's shorter and easier to digest for grievers, because really one of the things that shocked me was I couldn't read after Brian died, and I'm a big reader. I couldn't focus, I couldn't concentrate, I couldn't take things in. So my new book, and I'm sorry if you're looking, it still has the proof mark across it because I haven't actually received my copies, but it's called Grief Unmasked: 10 Most Common Myths and Misconceptions. And I thought it's really important for people to understand about grief. So we hear all these misconceptions about you have to be strong or time heals all wounds. And people go, oh, okay. But they don't know what that means and they don't know how that impacts their grief journey. So I wanted to unpack some of those grief misconceptions that can really end up being roadblocks for people.
Oh my gosh. And we thank you so much for that. I think everyone can use this. There's always some time in our life that we've lost someone very close to us, and how we deal with that can really it can actually change the trajectory of your life too. So,
Absolutely.
how important is that to heal? And is that how your first book, writing the poems, was that just you going through your healing process?
It really was. I mean, I didn't even set out to write a book. I mean, it wasn't that I sat down and thought, I think I'll write a book on grief poetry. I just started writing poetry and they kept mounting up. And I thought, oh, I think this might make a book. And excuse me, so I divided them into sections and I looked at them. And when I read back now, they're heartbreaking because it really was that outpouring of just unbelievable grief that I felt after Brian died. Excuse me. And um, and the journey from a shattered heart to in pieces to making broken beautiful. And so it does become more hopeful in the end. But one of my friends said to me, I had no idea you felt like that. Like, well, no, as you know, because everybody thinks you look fine. Because you
Mm.
do put that facade on, and that's another thing with the misconceptions is when somebody says, oh, be strong, or you are strong, it implies that you shouldn't really feel those emotions, or at least don't show them. And so what happens is you start to get a little embarrassed. You're like, oh, I shouldn't be really emotional. I better just put on a brave face. So you put on a brave face and you keep doing that day in, day out, whether it's at work or with friends, and you don't really feel the emotions. You don't feel the grief. And we have to feel it. We have to address it to get through it. Because
Mm.
if we don't, I think it's about 7 to 10% of people will develop complicated grief because of unresolved grief, because we haven't dealt with them. So when you understand that, actually it's okay to be emotional, you should cry. Somebody's died, you love them. How could you not cry?
Right. And you can't set a time to that, a time limit. But you just said something that I have to pull out.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How did you say this?
I don't know, what did I say?
Whoa, I wanted to like stop you right there. Um, so when people see you too, they didn't know you were going through that. So, the thing is that when you are and you're like, well, I'm not going to walk around sobbing every day
No.
and pouring to every single person that I meet. But I will tell you, and I think we discussed this. So, as a hairstylist, I work in a hair salon as well. And so, my clients will come in and I'll see them. One of my clients recently that lost her husband in the past year, and she would come in and she was like, "I'm so sorry." She would just like, "I can't help it."
Mhm.
And I was like, "It's okay," especially here.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
this
Everybody
is a
tells
good
the hairdresser everything, don't they? Well,
right.
I mean, you've brought up a really good point. You cannot go around crying all the time to everybody. And so that's where picking the right people to be with helps, And I was very lucky. I had wonderful friends, but it wasn't quite enough. I still needed, and I didn't do it till too late, some grief support from a professional to help me work through some of the stuff. So I think one of the things is pick the people that you open up to because not everybody can handle it. Some people are able to sit with you and allow you to talk, but some others want to fix you. And I think that often comes from a place of love. They don't want to see you hurting, so they think, let's cheer you up. How can we make you feel better? Let's go out. Let's go to a movie. Should you start dating again? All of these things, which are valid things, except it has to be done in the time that the griever is ready for those. And so it's about validating the feelings. What David Kessler would say is witnessing the grief. You have to sit with somebody and allow them to outpour how they're feeling and tell their story. Tell it over and over. And it's in the telling when people seem to repeat going over and over what's happened, they're processing what's happened. It's like they're having to learn, the brain has to learn that their loved one's not coming back, they're not near, they're not close, and the brain has to adapt to this. And so, as a griever might tell the story of what happened, a friend might go, oh, that's terrible. But, after 2 months, they maybe don't want to hear it. They certainly don't after longer than that. And so, it's a question of learning how to feel the emotions, to express them, but not getting stuck in them.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't want, your friends every time they see you to give you that look,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah.
They're like, "Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah." And
So go on. Well, what I was going to say is there's a really beautiful model of grieving called the dual process model of grief. And that talks about loss orientation activities, which would be crying, yearning, looking at photos, telling your friends about what's going on, and then restoration activities, oriented activities, which might be going and making your dinner, going out to the shops, doing things. And they say, you can't be all in grief or all in the restoration ones. We oscillate between the two. And so it's okay to maybe set aside a time to grieve, to cry, maybe half an hour if you're at work. Go for a walk, sit on a bench, do a bit of grief, come back and do the more restorative stuff of being back at work or in the house. But you go between the two, you set time for both. We don't want to stay in all of one or all of the other. And so it's that balance. And the more I understand about it, the harder I realize it is to grieve.
Right. Okay, so I just took a note. There was something that you had said about, and I forget what you called it, but you said when you don't mourn, when you don't grieve and you don't release, that it can get stuck in your body.
Yeah,
So
unresolved
please,
grief. Yeah.
so
So,
please tell us about that.
yeah. So what happens is if we have an emotion, if we don't express it, it doesn't go away. It's still there. And so certainly as a physical therapist, I used to see this because I dealt with people with chronic pain. They,
Mm,
much like the hairdresser, would come to me and tell me everything. And so often there would be a big emotional component that had never been dealt with, whether that was abuse, an old grief, or whatever. And so, what happens when we don't feel our grief, when we get busy, when we just ignore it and push it down, what can happen is that you may start to develop insomnia, headaches, strange aches and pains. Your immune system drops down. It affects us physically as well as emotionally. And I think that was a learning thing for me that grief is a whole body experience, it's not just the emotions.
oh gosh, I can totally understand this because now that I've done my work, my research, we've been working in the personal development
Yeah.
community for a while and I understand and I can see that. And yes, as a hairstylist and I could see people coming in and yes, the ones that were holding on to the past did have a lot of issues in their body.
Yeah. And again, this is where it's challenging because people hold on, they cling on because they're scared that if they let go of some of the stuff, they'll forget or it dishonors their loved one. And so, as a coach, the balance is listen, you can always keep connected. This is called continued bonds. We want to keep connected to the people that have died and we want to live our life. So, it's that balance of the two. So, how do you keep connected? Well, you look at photos, you talk about them, you keep them present. My husband is always here, always. I know exactly what he would say in any circumstance. Probably not repeatable here, but I know what he would say. I sense that. And I don't feel disconnected from him spiritually, although, of course, physically he's not here. So it's a transformation of the relationship in some ways. And I'm going to give people just a little bit of brain science here. This is so interesting that when we are in a relationship with somebody who's very close, our brain creates a neural firing pattern for them in the brain, like a little brain map of them. They're always there. Even when they're gone, that firing pattern remains etched in your brain. That's why it's really hard for the brain to get hold of this. Why aren't they coming home? They always came home. And so you've got this little pattern there. And for people who aren't spiritual or who think, death is it, and I have clients like that, and I say, but they're always with you because their pattern's there. And it's kind of comforting. It's a comforting
Yeah,
thing. Always there, an actual firing
it is.
pattern for that person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good thing to remember.
Mhm. It
Yes.
is.
One of the things that you have done that I absolutely love is that you've created this community
Yeah.
and you have a coffee chat.
I do, a grief cafe. I
Yeah.
have a grief cafe once a month, the first Thursday of every month, and anybody who's grieving the loss of someone is welcome. And it's really a place to come and share your story. And we had a beautiful one last week. We had 5 different ladies all telling different stories, and each one picking up something from the other. It's a community there. And I can hear your story every month for as many months as you need to, whereas maybe your friend can't. So it's a safe place, it's non-judgmental, it's only for grievers. And so people feel comfortable crying, telling their story, being uplifting. One lady, she actually put a really lovely testimonial on LinkedIn alive after this. And she said, even though my grief was 10 years ago, I I didn't realize I still had some more stuff to deal with. And she cried in the cafe, and she had really come to give hope. So it's interesting to see how people still have little bits to deal with that we don't realize. So it's really lovely. So yeah, I do that
Mm.
once a month. I also do a workshop, a free workshop every month. I'm doing one this week. I don't know when this is going to be put out, so it doesn't matter. But I do one every month. So if you follow me on my socials, you'll see when that is. Because I want people to understand about grief. The more we understand about it, the more we can deal with it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. How do people join your community, or is it all on like a Facebook group? Is that
No,
how
I don't.
everything?
I don't do Facebook groups anymore. I don't like them. So no, go to my website. The Grief Cafe sign up form is there. Sign up and you'll get a Zoom link, and we hold it on Zoom. And workshops I really only put out on my socials. But if you go to my website, everything is there. So as in all the socials, the book link, the Grief Cafe, and you can email me from there. So everything is there. And it says my name, carolannons.com. So it's easy.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
So you talked a little bit about your first book, Kintsugi Your Heart. Is that right?
mhm.
And then your second book is Grief Unmasked,
Yes, yeah,
the 10 most common myths and misconceptions.
yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this.
So, as I was saying, people don't really know about grief. They don't know what's right or what's wrong. And we tend, because we don't talk about it, we never know what to say to people, do we? When somebody's died and you're standing in front of them and you say these silly things like, "Oh well, time heals all wounds," or you're young enough to have another baby, or at least you can have another husband, or because we don't know. One of the sort of misconceptions, I think, is the 5 stages of grief. I think I'm going to bring that one up because Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a psychiatrist, wrote about these 5 stages that she saw her terminally ill patients going through, not grievers. So if you were to Google grief, which I think we all do when we're grievers, the 5 stages of grief come up, and I can remember looking at them thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm not in denial, I'm not angry, I'm not bargaining. Yes, I've been through some depression and getting to acceptance. And the problem is, I think you're doing your grief wrong because you're not falling into these nice categories. Now, David Kessler, who I did my training with, adapted them for the griever. So I love it. But the thing is, people don't know that, and they see the original 5 stages, look at them and think, oh my gosh, I'm not doing my grief right. Because I looked at them and thought, great, now I have a roadmap. It's me because I'm a physio. I need exercises. Tell me what to do. And so I looked at them and I just thought, oh, that's weird. Yeah, well, I can't deny it. I was there and I can't bargain because it's too late and I'm not actually angry. Do I need to find things to fit into the stages? So I think that the lesson is there are no nice, neat stages. You may do some of them, but not necessarily in a nice order. So something like that can really throw you off in your grief journey right at the beginning,
Ooh, right?
right?
Because give me a roadmap and you feel like you need to follow that. And
Yep.
if you're not on track, but everybody's different.
Everybody's different. And so another one is there's no timeline. We touched on this. And I think, we think, oh, it's a year. She must be good now. No, not necessarily. Again, David Kessler says acute grief is about 2 years.
Mm.
And for the loss of a significant other, this may surprise people, it takes 5 to 8 years. Now,
Wow.
yeah, right. I would say with the right support and right knowledge, that can come down. But it changes because it depends on your relationship. Was it a good one? Were you close? Well, then you'll grieve pretty hard. Were you estranged? You'll still grieve. Um, How did they die? Was it a death by suicide? Was it Alzheimer's? Was it sudden? Was it an accident? What's your mental health like? Were you somebody who was depressed or anxious prior to their death? Well, grief's going to amp that up for you. So
Mm.
you can put five widows in a line and they'll all grieve differently. One will be married at 1 year, one at 7 years may still be right in the throes of grief and not be able to get out of it, depending on also the support they have and how grief was modeled for them. So, so much in there that affects the timeline. Hence, we can't say 1 year and done or 2 years and done. I mean, it would be lovely if we could, but we just can't.
Yeah. So writing was a lot of your healing journey, obviously.
It was
Yeah.
huge. I mean, I didn't know. I didn't know that. And so, one of the things about grief, depending on where you are, there's something called post-traumatic growth. We can have post-grief growth. Can we, through our grief, I think actually, I'm going to say David Kessler again. I was just reading another one of his books, and he talks about collateral beauty. And I love that. I'm like, ooh, can something beautiful come out as some great loss or something really sad? And I'm thinking, of course, I would prefer to have Brian here. That goes without saying. But since I can't and I have no choice in that, did something beautiful come out of my grief over him? Well, yes. I started writing poetry. I published 2 books. I would never have done that. I would never have found that I liked writing. I would never have become a coach. I wouldn't have this new purpose of helping grievers. So that would be collateral beauty to me. And so, can we look at our grief? Are there any really special things that we can bring forward through our grief, maybe from our loved one? You know, were they very kind? Were they generous? Were they fun? Are there things that you want to bring forward that they had in their life that they taught you and you sort of bring it forward? That would be collateral beauty, you know, I just love that term, collateral beauty. How nice is that?
I love that too. I've never heard
Yeah,
that before.
me neither. I know. Good old days. I love it.
Yes, I do. So you feel like through all of this, somehow you found your purpose.
Yeah, a new purpose. And I think
Mhm.
this is what's so interesting with life, isn't it? We have different purposes as we go on our lifeline. I mean, my purpose initially was to become a physical therapist, and then, of course, to get married. And now my children were my purpose for the longest time. And I would have to say they remain my purpose, even though they're adult children, right? Um, but when Brian died, I questioned what I wanted to do. I loved being a physical therapist. But yeah, my purpose changed. I had a hard time with grief. It was much harder than I thought, went on much longer than I thought. And I thought, And I seem to feel that I can educate people and support people in that and help them through it. A little less difficulty than maybe they're having. That gives me great purpose to be able to do that. Yeah.
I would think it would be one of the most fulfilling things.
Hmm. It is.
And I think that's how a lot of us find our or our next purpose.
Our next
One of
purpose.
our purposes in life is
Yes.
going through some rough things in life.
Yeah. I think, life experience, wisdom, age,
Mm.
all of that thrown in. And not everybody is going to have some great new purpose or meaning. And I don't want anybody to feel they haven't grieved well if they haven't got a new purpose. You don't have to have one. It happens that I found one. It doesn't mean you have to look for one, but you do have to have meaning in your life. And it doesn't have to be big meaning. It can be the meaning of, you know what, I just want to spend more time with my family and see my grandchildren or my children or my friends. That brings meaning to you. Those are your values. Then that is meaning. It doesn't mean you have to set up a foundation or write a book like you did.
Mhm.
Meaning means different things to different people.
Yeah.
Um, but there can be beautiful opportunities if that's something you're looking for
Yeah.
or not looking for, but they fall into your lap. Who knew?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's, we were in a coaching program together, and we knew that we wanted to expand our lives. We didn't know what that looked like, and we were looking for a newer purpose, right? And so I think that's just so beautiful. And if your purpose is, to be the best mom and caregiver or whatever it is, that's a beautiful purpose.
Absolutely. It's one of the most important purposes. Yeah,
I know it
absolutely. There's
is.
nothing more hard than being a mum for all those mums out there, or a dad. But
Yes.
it's a hard job. But at some point your children leave, and then often women are left with now what, right? A bit like after grief. If your husband dies or your child dies, and you're like, now what? Who am I without them?
Yeah.
And that's when you have to start digging deep and figuring things out.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of where I was at in this process of, becoming an empty nester for the first
Mhm.
time and thinking, okay, what am I going to do now? When your children, are in college and you're still in that same house, you're like, wait, this doesn't feel right. So that's the type of people that I seem to resonate with and work with and help in their journeys too. And there's just nothing more rewarding than that. And so I love what you're doing. And was there anything in that you would like to share with us from your book? I know last time you read a little insert or
Ooh,
one of your
I
poems.
don't, I
I
don't
put you
know.
on the spot
You,
today, didn't I?
you really did. Because it's
Hmm.
chapters, so it's a little bit difficult. But I mean, here are where does the idea of solving grief come from? Because grief is a problem to be solved. So the misconception stems from our culture's discomfort with vulnerability and pain. We live in a
Mm.
society that prioritizes productivity and getting back to normal, leaving little room for the slow, messy process of grief. Many people expect grief to be quick and neat. A few days off work, a few tears shed, and then back to normal. So sort of talking through those things, and then at the end, um the myth grief is a problem to be solved. The takeaway: grief is a normal and natural response to loss, needs to be experienced and witnessed so that you can move forward. It's not a problem to be solved, but a journey to be honored. So at the end of each chapter I'll have like the little myth or misconception and the reframing it of what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So this time you expand to be on the poems and you're more chapter based
Yeah,
in this.
these
Right.
aren't poems at all. This is chapter
Yeah.
based. The poems are different. Yeah,
I
totally.
think I think poems would be so difficult to write.
Wow, I don't know. I think I
I
tend
am so impressed with you.
thank you. Thank you. I really quite enjoy it. And you know what's really interesting is reading
Oh,
a book now, a word will pop up, just like we said, collateral beauty. I'm like, oh, that is so beautiful. I wonder if I could write a poem on that. Because now words are sort of, that's meaningful. And sometimes I'll write down different words and think, oh, how can I weave that into something? So yeah, it's just
and,
opening the perspective.
and Carol, this is like it's like writing music, isn't it? Writing songs.
It is there when we both know about music, my late husband being a jazz pianist and your daughter being a singer. So yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. It's just a different thing. And what's really interesting to me is I also play piano. So I'm a musician, but after Brian died, I couldn't stand it. I could not,
Mhm.
just couldn't. And I still don't got a piano with a grand piano with all this music, and I don't really go and play it. And I think my creativity has just gone into poetry instead, or into writing. It's just a different avenue. Still creative.
So have you played the piano since?
I just don't, he used to sit and play. He'd say, hey, what song do you want me to play? And then he'd say, tell me a key. And I'd pick a weird key and he'd play it in any key, and just play it. Or, I'd want a happy song like, World on a String or something, Sweet Lorraine or something fun. And he'd play it, or play me some blues. Yeah, I miss that. I miss going to bed. And because he was a jazz pianist, he'd stay up till 2 in the morning and I could hear the piano downstairs when I was in bed. I had one rule though, no scales and arpeggios, only nice stuff when I'm upstairs. So I don't want to hear any technique.
Right.
Um, but it's interesting when you have a creative side, you want to express it. And I think in grief, we can express it through writing, through journaling, through music, through painting. Some people do it through art. So there are different ways for us to get those emotions out.
Yes. Yes, there are. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you
So,
so much for sharing this with us. And where can everybody find your books?
on Amazon. They're both on Amazon. So just head over to Amazon.
Okay. All right. And so your second one has just been out for a week.
Yes.
And congratulations to you, if I did not tell you already.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm very proud of you. You're such a good inspiration to so many, and we really need this.
Thank you very
So I appreciate you. I appreciate you hopping
much.
back on here today. Yes, and I believe it'll be next week that I will be putting your podcast out there for everyone to hear. So, everyone, please go and check out Carol's book, Grief Unmasked: The 10 Most Common Myths and Conceptions.
Misconceptions.
Misconceptions.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.
It's kind of hard for me to say. Okay. Yes. Aw. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. So good seeing you again today.
Nice to see you again. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. And thank you everyone else for coming. And you know what? In order to have this type of speaker on here, like Carol, a two-time author, you know, please, if you can subscribe to my YouTube channel and my Unleash Her podcast, we'll be able to have beautiful, amazing speakers just like Carol. And I thank you again so much for joining us today, you guys. Thank you. And I don't like to say goodbye. My grandma always said, see you later. Take care.